familiar face if you know Indiana politics at all. Longtime state representative, longtime leader in the Democratic Party in Indiana, Ed DeLaney. On a very busy Thursday, you're supposed to be down at the state capitol, and I know you will be shortly. Thanks for spending some time with us. Your reflections during moments like that, and if you will, share us maybe first time you were aware of Jimmy Carter.
Well, I'll tell you. It was 1976. I was in Iowa for one of the first Iowa caucuses. I was there for a gentleman named Senator Birchby, who wanted to be president. And I got into a van with a guy named Ed Bradley, who later became a famous national correspondent. And Bradley's telling me there's a guy named Jimmy Carter, and he's in the lead. And I keep asking him, who is Jimmy Carter? That was my first. He was basically unknown. I'd heard the name, but he was a governor of what we thought was a small southern state at the time. He had done a good job on the race issue in a state which had been blatantly racist in its governors. But, you know, who was he? And he just kept working. And he did retail politics and did it well. He got himself in the White House, and Birchby was happy to go back to the Senate.
What do you think that Americans should take from Jimmy Carter's life and legacy that so many have admired?
Well, a couple things. He was true to his faith. He was a man of peace. People forget. He went to Camp David and spent days with Anwar Sadat from Egypt and Menachem Begin from Israel and made peace. No president had done that since, I think, Teddy Roosevelt had done something with the Japanese and the Russians 100 years earlier. It was remarkable. So he was a man of peace. He was a simple man, and he acted on what he believed. I think his biggest problem, because he's never been evaluated very highly, was he expected too much of himself and he expected too much of us. And so when things fell short, it was hard for him. It was hard for us.
Set the bar too high, and falling short of it is more devastating.
Yeah, and when the Iranian hostage thing occurred, he bravely sent our forces in to try to have a rescue, and 2 helicopters got too close to each other. And there she wrote. And that was the end of the rescue mission. And night after night, we watched Ted Koppel on ABC News tell us how many days we'd been held hostage. I could feel the water dripping on the ballots that were designed to be voted for Jimmy Carter. It was just terrible.
You used a phrase, was it retail politics?
Yeah.
Explain that and why he was good at it.
He was good at getting in a small room with a small number of people and relating to them and speaking in terms that they understood. And that was the whole Iowa trick, where you'd go to somebody's living room, there'd be 10 people, and there's a guy next to you who's running for president of the United States. He's trying to tell 10 people to come to a caucus on a wintry night and vote for him. He could do that. And I met him one time, and that was much year later in the Carter Center. And I think it was in connection with monitoring elections. I did some of that, and that was one of the many things he did. He went around the world making sure that elections were conducted fairly. A very interesting mission. And he could just relate. He was simple. Isn't that terrible?
To be simple?
You know what I mean. I'm being sarcastic. but that's a good thing. And that's why he's a guy who picked up a hammer and figured out that he was building many houses by picking up his hammer. And wonderful. Yeah, in fact, he got me to pick up my hammer, which is something I would never have done.
You went out on a habitat build?
I did, yeah. So I like the guy.
Representative DeLaney, outside of that, you've had your own remarkable career. What do you think you observe personally from him as a man, as a politician, that you have put into your own career?
Well, I think one of the things you need to think about is how much you talk about yourself. So, for example, he was in the nuclear Navy. That was a big thing early on. And, you know, he didn't spend a lot of time bragging about his service. He kept his friends. I try to follow that. Bob McKinney from Indianapolis, the law school's named after him. He had a bank. He's named, the Bose McKinney firm is named after him, the law firm. They were in Naval Academy together. Carter put him in as the head, I think, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, one of the big banks. Bob McKinney left Indiana and went there because he was Carter's friend, not because he was some, you know, some billionaire or some actor or something like that. It was because he knew him from his days in the Naval Academy. So he was loyal. I'd like to do that.
I would think that most historians would posit that to run for president, you have to have some level of ambition.
Oh, yeah.
Often a lack of humility accompanies ambition. Could Jimmy Carter, though, have done with a little less humility?
Yeah.
If he really wanted his legacy to be different?
Yeah. Because he was so humble, any slip was magnified. Any slight
Sometimes he
snap-
would point the slip out.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, yeah. He would admit that he was making mistakes. Yeah, he would admit. I remember when he got on TV and said he had lust in his heart. What was he talking about?
Right.
He should not have said that. That was one of his problems. He would say things that were self-critical. And guess what? If you do self-criticism, a lot of people will like to take that train and ride on it. So, anyway, I think he was a great human being.
Representative, speaking on that, adding to that point, he was such a great individual. Many people throughout his presidency and even afterwards would say that his legacy afterwards overshadowed the legacy during his one term.
I think that's true. I think if he got a lot of people to help poor people, to travel around the world, to help with elections, to deal with health crises in Africa, those are enormous contributions that continue to pay dividends for all of us. So yeah, I think that is true. He was a bridge president. We were trying to get over Nixon and get ready for Reagan, God forbid, but that's where we were, and he did a brilliant job at that.
Do you think that we will possibly, now that we are reflecting back, do you think more of a spotlight will be put on his time during office?
Yeah, I think we need to look at that. I think we need to think, for example, he was there when the beginning of the Afghanistan crisis. People don't remember that, but the Russians invaded Afghanistan. Carter said, we're out of the Olympics. That was a big deal. People have no idea how 40 years ago, the United States says we're not going to the Olympics. I mean, we're lucky the country didn't collapse over that. People were so upset. The world was upset, but that was his first step in that. We'll be looking back, why did he do that? You know, why did he put Paul Volcker in as the head of the Fed? We were in great inflation problems. He put in this guy who just basically made it impossible to get a loan. That fixed it, and it hurt Carter.
People talk about not kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
That can could have been kicked, and he didn't kick it.
Yeah, he did not. He did what he had to do, and he did. It's interesting. There was like 2 weeks between the time he nominates Volcker and Volcker's confirmed. That couldn't happen today. The Congress used to work. You know, it doesn't now. But anyway, he was. You know, I think his inner worth was part of his problem. It's hard to love a saint. You know, I've had experience with 1 or 2 people that I think are saint-like, and they wear you out. They do, and he did that.
Well, Representative DeLaney, it is very refreshing to have your input on such a monumental moment in time that we were experiencing right now. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And of
Thank
course,
you.
You are just one of many that we are going to hear from, and we'll have much more after the break.